And we'll get started. So welcome everybody to January St. Anne Flycasters program. As you know, we take questions through chat, and then Nick will address those questions either when he takes a break or at the end of the talk. So you can either use the chat function or the Q&A function, I guess. No, there isn't a Q&A function in meetings. So use the chat function for asking questions, or later on.
Hey, here's another Monte Carlo. We had at least one or two yesterday.
Later on, I will unmute you all, and you can ask your questions live. I just went ahead and muted everybody to avoid background noise. So with some announcements for tonight, our president's over in Hawaii. So Ken has agreed to give us some announcements for tonight. Ken?
Yeah, there's only a few things. Obviously, we're meeting by Zoom this month, and we'll be meeting by Zoom again next month. We will not have in person. And if you saw Tim's email, we've postponed the auction until hopefully in June. So plan for that, and the weather should be nice and everything else by then. We've got a couple of outings coming up. Not this Saturday, but next Saturday, we'll be doing Lake Wainema. That's on January 22nd. And then in February 26th, weather permitting and everything else, we'll be hopefully fishing Detroit up there. So also, I think Bob has a Project Healing Water fly fishing meetings coming up. Probably could use a little bit more participation in that if you're interested in helping out with that. Check the newsletter. Bob had a good article in there on that. So you have anything else to add on that, Bob?
No, I don't. Just everybody note that we're meeting on the 4th Tuesday, not Thursdays anymore, and we're at Center 50 Plus off of Portland Street up by the Vets Center. And that'll kick off at 6 o'clock at the end of this month. And the first session is going to be help divvy up the 10 boxes of fly tying materials and sort them into an order of resemblance, plus build individual fly tying kits for the vets. Okay. That's all I have.
Thanks, Bob. And with that, Shandy, you're on. Introduce our speaker.
You want to unmute yourself, Shandy?
Could you get Bob to repeat that meeting time for the Healing Waters?
It will be the 4th Tuesday at 6 p.m. And when you go in the center, you want to go upstairs to the craft room, and it'll be to your left as you come up the stairs, or probably left as you come out of the elevators.
Okay, Shandy.
Okay, well, I'd like to welcome Nick Wheeler back with us for our presentation tonight. Nick is definitely one of my mentors. I met him 3.5 years ago, and he has created a monster. You guys all know where I started from, which was no point of reference at all, to knowing a little, enough to be dangerous, basically. And Nick is all part of that problem. I really, he is definitely family to me now, and you guys are really going to love this presentation. It's very in depth. The photos are beautiful, and it's a good time. So with that, please welcome Nick Wheeler.
Hi, everybody. Thanks. Yeah, I am Trouble. That is definitely one of my middle names. And let's get this screen shared here, and we'll get this up. Thank you, Shandy, and thanks to the club for having me, and having me 1 month after an absolute disaster with internet service. So hopefully we won't have any problems. Is that working on your side? Everybody can see that?
Not yet. It hasn't come up yet.
Hasn't come up yet?
No,
That's weird.
your video went off though. There,
Okay,
there's your video back.
Let's see if it comes back here.
We did test this
Sorry about
earlier and it was working, so we know it
It
can work.
was.
Okay, there's yours. Looks
There-
like your desktop.
Okay, perfect. Now we're going back there. We should.
There you
Good.
go.
Okay, awesome. Oh, okay. So yeah, no problems on this Zoom one. Fingers crossed. So a little bit more about me. I've been fishing for a little bit over 20 years and working within the fishing industry about just as long. Now, I wouldn't say I'm the master, nor would I say I know everything, but over these years fishing, instructing, and guiding, I've picked up a lot of useful information that will help you hopefully become a better angler. And really, it's every angler's dream to fish as much as possible throughout the year. So let's discuss the ways we might be able to do this successfully. Let's examine all the best opportunities we have locally to accomplish this feat. Some of these are definitely going to be known to you, while maybe others you've just heard rumors about. This presentation will help you catch fish continuously throughout the year and will aid in your pursuit of the endless season. In the end, I'm going to share my rotation of fishing spots and how I spend my year on the water. So, what's the difference between a good angler and a great angler? Is it skill? Is it luck? I believe it's timing. Being at the right place at the right time is key to success. Though those other two really do help. And let's look at an example. The Metolius River. Most of you have fished this place, and it sure has humbled quite a few of us. This is known as the hardest river in Oregon. Some people will go years before they even catch their first fish here. Finicky fish, crystal clear water. This is not the best mix. But if you know when to go, there are times that the fish can act stupid, even hungry for your fly. And it's that knowledge of this that really changes the game. So instead of fishing whatever, whenever, have a plan to fish the best water at that time. And that's what this is really about. When I first started putting this together, it was pre-pandemic. And there was the way to kind of highlight all the fisheries and hopefully open up your eyes to endless possibilities nearby, and just what time to fish them. Now, this sport has seen an absolute influx of anglers like that lower pitcher, which is wonderful. It has strengthened the community and will bring new generations of stewards to our rivers, but the crowds can be something else. Our once secluded spot may not be so much anymore. So, like my angling choices recently, this presentation has evolved to include some of the off the beaten path options, which I'm planning to share with you. Now, some of these might just mean going down the trail a little further, or others might be a float trip through a section that gets a little less traffic on your favorite river. There are many ways we can avoid the crowds without necessarily just changing locations. So what are we going to do is go through a bunch of these locations and discuss when and why we want to fish them. Now, we might go through a few locations multiple times because they offer so much potential. Unfortunately, we don't have all the time in the world, and I can talk quite a bit. So, of course, I can't cover everything, but I'll cover what I feel is most important. If you end up with questions for that location, make a mental note and we can kind of go through it at the end. I'll try to make maybe a few breaks during the seasons, and we can try to see if we can answer questions that way a little bit too. We'll just see how fluid this works with Zoom. It's hard to see hands go up. If not, like you totally forget and you watch this on YouTube or whatever on this recording, you can always just call the shop or come on down and I'll reveal all my secrets. I wear them on my sleeve. We're going to start by breaking this up into seasons to get it a little bit organized. Some of these fisheries overlap and bleed into other seasons, so hang in there with me as we kind of plan these out, and hopefully we'll get into those gems. Spring. This is a good place to start. Everything is new and green. This always feels like the start of a fishing season to me. There are two parts of the year that I wish I could just absolutely stop or slow down time. And this is one of them. There's just so many options in spring. So let's just get into them. And since I mentioned it, let's start with the hardest river. This place humbles the best, the Metolius. Now, spring can just be excellent on this river with numerous hatches that equals hungry fish. April and May get a great March brown and blueing olive. June is going to be that time frame when those green drakes start to show up, and that's the big one. This, though, is a gentleman's river. Since most of these hatches aren't till midday, you don't have to worry about getting up early. Typically, on my time that I'm out there in the spring, I may not even get out to the river till 10. I might hit the Camp Sherman store for lunch and then start fishing. So, and then usually off the water by 5. You don't have to spend all day on this thing to catch fish. You just want to be in the peak time when those fish are eating. Now, speaking of peak time, the best time to fish this river as far as months is June. The peak is going to be Father's Day weekend. That's when those green drakes are typically at the biggest populations. Look for stormy weather. Typically, if it's overcast or cloudy or showers, those bugs go nuts. I have my best fishing days over there typically when a storm's running through. No one else is on the water because they don't want to deal with it, but the bugs are out and the fish are eating. The drakes make these fish stupid. Now, those drakes, though, don't hatch on the entire river. They mainly hatch from the canyon section down to the lower bridge, Bridge 99. So that's the section you're going to want to target on that river for drakes. If you go up by Camp Sherman, you might see a few, but you're not going to see the masses that you will in that lower river. Another thing, if you just go into one of the most popular holes, which is still very good, like the Dolly hole, there's lots of pressure. And though fish are caught there, if you walk down maybe another quarter mile, half mile, or upstream, you're going to have less crowds and therefore more aggressive fish. Okay, next up, the Deschutes and the big show, or what I like to call the salmon fly season. This is what everyone dreams about all year long, at least I do. Aggressive fish eating big dry flies like it's going out of style. This isn't a secret, no doubt about that. But there's maybe a few tips that I can give you that'll make it a little more successful for you. So let's see if we can get to those. First, this one's a big one. Go as many times as possible. You can't time the hatch perfectly. It changes by water temperature and weather, but the more you go, the better chances you have of hitting it, right? So if you go 1 week and that was your only week, but that was the bad timing of weather, of course the fishing was slow. Next week might have been the week. So if you go maybe 3 times in the season, one of those times is probably going to be spectacular. Pre-hatch fishing. Now, this is before all those big bugs are around. It can be so good. Those nymphs are migrating out from deeper water into the shallows to crawl up the bank. which isn't going to be the best dry fly fishing, but the nymphing is just going to be lights out. Also, word hasn't gotten out that fish are eating yet. So there are hardly any people out on the Deschutes. So it's all to yourself. Now, here's the other thing to know with the salmon fly hatch. Because of dam temperature changes, the hatch progression has also changed. It's not what it was, 10, 15 years ago. That mixing tower has changed things. The hatch no longer works its way up river slowly. It happens almost all at once or kind of in pockets. So that means we have a little bit of a shorter window to hit. Most often, those best weeks of dry fly fishing are going to be the last 2 weeks in May. Now, unfortunately, the last 2 weeks of May also usually means Labor Day, or no, Memorial Day. There will be people out there for that, but most of them are campers and rafters, not as many fishermen. Most of us fishermen stay away because of the holidays. I can tell you, keep going there. The other thing this hatch, though, is not short of, especially on Memorial Day, is people. If you can float, do it. If you can hike, walk further. If you're road fishing, don't limit yourself to just around town and mopping. If you can do a multi-day float, your options are spectacular, and now you're pretty much alone. Do not miss this fishery. The crowds are worth every bit of it. This is trout fishing in Oregon at its best. So now let's go into a little bit more less known fisheries. Some sea run cutthroat on the coast. We have so many rivers close by and not a lot of people fish them for trout. If you're looking to not see another angler, this is pretty much a safe bet. So for example, let's just list off a couple so you guys know what I'm talking about. The Siletz, Nehalem, Trask, Wilson, Elsie, Kilchis, Nestucca River, and that's just a few of them. Trout season on these rivers, though, only downside, doesn't open up till May 22nd. The best time to fish for the bigger sea run fish is in the early season, right before it opens through about June. The larger fish at this point are migrating out into the bays to eat bigger and better meals. The smaller resident cutthroats stay in the river to feed on smaller things like bugs and little minnows. You can still fish all summer long for these smaller resident fish, though, and this can be an absolute blast, especially if you're using like tackle, like 3-weight or 4-weight, and some people even go down to a 2-weight. A tip on these cutthroat is that they love chasing things. So not always is a dead drifted dry fly the best option to get these things. Sometimes it's best to like twitch or skate your fly across the surface like it's trying to get away from them. And that really triggers a bite.
It looks like we've lost Nick. Let me see if I can invite him back. Shandy, you want to give him a call or text him? I don't think I actually have his phone number. Sorry, guys.
Tim, you're doing great. We got twice as much as we did last time.
We got past the Metolius. Sorry about that.
Tim, I think the picture back of you is Beaver Tail Campground, isn't it?
Oh, is that Beaver Tail?
Yep. If you probably look closely, there might be sheep up on the ridges there.
Oh, here he is. There he is. He's back.
Yay!
Hey.
Woo! That was close.
I hope.
There we go.
we
Apparently,
go.
when a phone
There we
call
go.
comes through, it just stops.
Oh, that's what happened.
Yeah, someone tried calling me and it shut down my whole program. So
I'll be darned.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, I
that's the
can-
hard part where the is that screen being shared again?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
we can see that.
cool. And we got to that slide. You guys saw that slide?
Yes, that's where you were.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Well, that's definitely better that I can see that it turns off, but it's still a little annoying with this update that a phone call untriggers my keynote. But we're here now. Okay, so we got into the cutthroat, 3 and 4 weight light tackle, really good kind of option, right? Tip on these cutthroat, skate your flies, don't dead drift. We've got that through.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So one last note on this fishery is that if you're trying to get someone into this sport, this is a awesome one to get someone that's novice or beginning angler. The fish are super eager to eat your fly. They want it so bad. So you don't have to have that perfect drift. You don't have to have that perfect landing of a fly. Those fish, if they're there, will chase. So especially getting, again, kids involved. A lot of the time too, our coastal rivers are nice and small. So if we want to get to the other side of the river, we just walk because it might just be ankle deep in some places, which is kind of nice. I'll take that. All right, moving on. American shad, the poor man's tarpon. These things come into the Willamette, Columbia, and Umpqua rivers by the millions. I like to call them the gateway drug to anadromous fish. So American shad pretty much return in the months of June and go through the first part of July if you're fishing the Columbia and the Willamette. Shad return earlier in the Umpqua River, typically more in that like May and June timeframe. This is because of water temperatures, and it's going to vary from year to year, kind of depending upon snow melt and different storms and such. Since there are millions, they can be pretty easy to catch. If you have a boat, the Willamette is the best option, though it has very few bank access points below the falls. If you're looking for bank access, what I would recommend is either the Columbia or the Umpqua River. Both of those places are awesome and have lots of opportunity. Why I love shad. After a shitty winter steelhead season like last year, who doesn't want a feel-good fishery? Well, this is it. It's not uncommon to go out and not catch maybe up to 50 fish in just a few hours. And that's hard to beat in any fishery. Have one on, lose it, no biggie. Next cast, you're probably going to have a chance to catch another. This is also another fishery that is perfect for getting a young or novice angler into the sport. There's nothing like immediate gratification to get somebody hooked. And yes, there is some pun intended in that. So next up, we get into Cascade Lakes. Now, this is a very broad one, but fishing in the early part of the season, this is one of those fisheries that most people forget about until later on in the summer. And it's exciting to hear that the club is going to go up to Detroit soon because we do have so many options of lakes in winter as well. Depending on elevation, though, and snowpack, some of these lakes start really fishing, and especially the higher up ones, as early as like April. Though I do recommend, this will be for sure for you guys this February trip, making sure that you layer up under those waders when fishing that early season. The water is mighty cold, but a lot of times those fish really don't care. In most of the lakes, subsurface fishing will be the name of the game until the water starts heating up. So stripping leech patterns or fishing chironomids under an indicator are usually going to be your best options. Once we have that first heat wave, typically sometime in that June-ish zone. The fish will key in on topwater presentations like ants and beetles. Don't miss that first heat wave fishing. It can just be lights out amazing. Another side note, the Cascades aren't just in Oregon. They go into Washington as well. So don't forget, there are a bunch of other lakes on the other side of the border, and it has a whole lot less people. Speaking of less people, next up we have our Cascade trout streams. Now, this one is another very broad kind of term here, but let's kind of narrow it down a little bit. So, like, let's think the Upper Molalla, the Santiam, Quartz Creek, Kalama, or maybe high up on the Mackenzie where it's less river and more creekish. These get very little pressure and people forget how close they are. Sometimes we just get so obsessed with the Deschutes and other big rivers, we forget about the stuff that's just right here. Now, I have a disclaimer attached to that statement. You're not going to have as many big fish that you're going to find on those east side fisheries, but you're not going to have to drive the 2+ hours. So it's what matters more to you. I personally like the change of scenery, especially if it's going to be, let's say, 110 degrees over in Maupin on a heat wave. I'd way rather be in an 75, 85 degree temperature Upper Cascade stream. Little known fact, there are some of these trout streams that are close to home and close to you guys that stay open all year long for trout on the west side. For me, this would be like the Kalama River, but most of these streams that we just mentioned don't open till May with that general trout opener. Just be sure to check your local regulations, a little bit of hunting, and you can find that there's quite a few little small streams nearby that you're allowed to fish for trout in February. Now, since most of these trout don't get that much pressure, they can be a little dumb, which is perfect. I love dumb fish. Attractor patterns work pretty good, but most of the streams get a small hatch of mayflies or caddis, which will fool those finicky fish. Most of the time, I fish these in the months of June or July when it's pretty hot on the east side, or I'm just tired of driving far. Another tip I can give you on these is try not to fish the campgrounds in those high traffic areas. These are the spots that will see the most amount of catch and kill or gear anglers that really just want to park their car, walk 10 feet and throw in a worm, which is fine, but you're just not going to have the best of luck there. So stay off the beaten path. You know, a lot of times, like, for instance, we can use like the Brighton Bush or the Upper Santiam. Like, those pullouts, of course, get hammered, or that campground. But if you walk 100 yards down a trail, a lot of people don't want to walk 100 yards from their car, and you might find some pretty nice fish around. Okay, so that is the end of our spring. Now, some of this will bleed over. I don't know if we want to do some of the questions on that now, or if we want to kind of hold them until the end.
Let's take some questions for spring.
Perfect.
One question was, where is your shop located?
The shop is in downtown Portland and right off of Gleason Street. And that is right next to the Ace Hardware, Pearl Ace. And it's right off of 16th and Gleason.
And the other question was, you had for when you were talking about this, the cutthroat, you had a couple rods that you were displaying. What flies
Yes.
do you have any fly? You talked about skidding flies. Any flies in
Yes.
particular you like?
So I can tell you probably my #1 go-to cutthroat fly, and it's probably because it has a ton of foam in it, and so it floats really well, and so you can skate it really well, is like just a big foam humpy, typically like size like 10, maybe maybe a 12 as a small one, but brightly colored, red, green. Those are my go-tos. Black works fine. There is a time in a pinch that I have run out of those, of course, and even just a chubby Chernobyl can do pretty well. And then that's as far as like top water skating for the most part. Any little classic streamer, like I'm a huge fan of Matukas and Spruce Run flies, and the classic Oregon Borden Special. That's a great fly. Those are more swung just under the surface, but they do avoid some of the smaller fish, which is nice because there'll be a little bit bigger hook.
That's all for now.
Perfect. Okay. Well, let's go into summer. So we just had a few of those spring ones really bleed into this month. But let's get into some others that we really consider summer fisheries. So carp on the fly. Most people look down on these fish, but I really think they're underappreciated. Carp are numerous. They're all around us. Plus they get big, like really big, exceeding 20 pounds in some cases. If they could just have a different shaped mouth, we could love them. But they don't, so they will always be the redheaded stepchild of the fishing world. Luckily, there is love out there for everyone, and carp fishing is becoming more mainstream. So why not try it? Carp fishing typically kicks off in April and can really be good pre-spawn, but the prime time is summer, when the water is warm and we have more sunny days. Carp fishing conditions are kind of opposite of trout. We want full sun and hot weather. It can be hot water too. Any day without wind will help quite a bit. We want to be able to try to see it, and the more wind waves there are, the harder it's going to be to see the carp. Most people, when we kind of first start getting into carp fishing, try to make that long Hail Mary cast. Like we want that perfect dry fly, that 60 feet to land perfectly in front of that trout. It's kind of not the way with carp. My perfect cast is probably 10 to 20 feet, and mainly so I can see that fish eat the fly and see it inhale it, so I know to set the hook. That long Hail Mary cast may look good, but it doesn't catch many carp. So to up your odds, and this is the fun part about carp fishing, is you really want to stalk your prey. You want to walk and sneak up. It's almost fishing with the side of hunting, which is really pretty fun. These fish are absolutely everywhere, and you can probably even find them in the pond that is next to your house. But if you're looking to find better targets, a good place to start around here, Sauvie Island. That's like probably one of the most popular places to find a ton of carp and tons of targets, or really anywhere in the Columbia, really from the gorge up. There's lots of them in the Willamette, just chocked full, but we have not as much public access. If you can find some public access that has some nice, like slower moving flats, please, by all means, catch carp there and let me know where you go. This is a fishery that is just starting, and we are just at the forefront of figuring it out. So it's kind of fun to be in the beginning of a fishery. And so enjoy it. If you can find water, carp pretty much probably live in it. So give it a shot. Another warm water fishery that doesn't get very much love. If we lived anywhere else in the US, this would be our prime target species. And sadly, we have one of the best smallmouth fisheries, and hardly anybody fishes it. The Columbia and Willamette rivers are filled with these hard fighting beasts. And it's very possible we could see the world record come out of the Columbia in the next few decades. The John Day and the Umpqua rivers also offer great bass fishing opportunities and probably have the better bank access over the Columbia and Willamette. But you might have to, drive a little bit further for them. They might not also have as big a fish as the Willamette and Columbia, but they are plentiful. Another perfect option, again, for those beginning anglers that we want to get people into. The best time to fish for bass is going to be June through September. Most bass are eating crayfish or smaller fish, so using streamers to imitate this is going to be your best bet. Sometimes you'll find these fish eating topwater, such maybe as like a frog or damsels. This is an absolute blast, and if you can find it happening or when it happens, don't miss it. You can find bass even in downtown urban areas, Salem. You just need bank access. Look for parks, boat ramps. If you have a boat, basically your options are endless. This fishery, again, has just been starting to be tapped. So like carp for the Pacific Northwest, this is so new. And so we can avoid the crowds and get to this before it kind of blows up. Also, we've had last summer terrible water temperatures in most of our trout streams, and we had hoot owl regulations in most of them. This is a fishery that does not take hoot owl into consideration because the fish love that warm water. So we don't have to worry about harassing these fisheries or stopping fishing when it's 100 out there. You can go and target bass and it will be good to your conscience. Okay, next up, this is dory fishing out of Pacific City. This isn't something new, but it's something that we kind of forget about sometimes. And it's definitely outside the box fly fishing. Bucktailing for coho, jigging for rockfish, even stripping for tuna in blue water. All of this can be done with a fly rod, and we don't have to jump on a plane to go to some faraway land. But we do need a dory, or at least we need to hire one. So prime time for these fisheries is usually July through September. Coho fishing will be at its best at this point in that July, August time frame. Rockfish, they're pretty much always eating, and tuna, it just depends on how close they are to land. The closer they are, the better. I really don't want to go take a boat ride 60 miles out. I prefer them to be 30 miles out. Makes life way more enjoyable and less seasickness. So one of the reasons that I love this fishery is it's not just our classic catch and release. Sometimes it's nice to bring some meat home. And these are one of those fisheries that we can, right? We can have hatchery coho fresh from the ocean going straight into our cooler. That's awesome. One of the other reasons I love this fishery and enjoy it is you don't have to wear waders. No tough wading at all. And you're close to all your buddies in the boat. So basically, Witty Banner is your day all day long. And by the end of it, you're still ending up in Pacific City. So restaurants and bars and all that life is right there for you to enjoy right when you get off the water. This is a great option for social gatherings of friends. I highly recommend trying this if you haven't already. It is a blast. And again, definitely off the beaten path. Okay, Cascade Lakes get some love in the summer and another great way to escape the heat. Again, lots of possibilities when you take in all the lakes in Washington as well. We're not just an Oregon Cascade mountain range. Most of the lakes are going to fish all summer long, but a few of the lakes, such as Merrill, Timothy, and Trillium, get a Hexagenia hatch, which is one of the world's largest mayflies. Typically, the hex hatch starts around the 4th of July and is going to run for about a month. These bugs only hatch in the last hours of the day, so make sure you stay late in the evening for this hatch. There are quite a few other hatches to keep you busy in the meantime, like ants and damsels and calabatus and midges, which fish in the middle of the day pretty much all summer. Now, this still allows you to fish chironomids and leeches and all that other stuff. but it's a fun thing to go out maybe for a lake in the afternoon, stay a little bit late if it's one of those lakes that gets those hexagenias, and stay till dark, because that's when the show begins, and it's fast and furious for 10 to 30 minutes. But oh man, those 30 minutes are amazing. Now, pro tip, and I'm sure some of you, like Shandy, will definitely agree with this: avoid full moons at any cost when fishing lakes. Typically, this is going to turn off fishing. Turnovers is another thing. That's when the lake stratifies and the warm and cool water switch, blowing the lake out. Both of those incidences are going to really hurt fishing. Now, it doesn't say you can't catch fish in those conditions, but I always check my lunar calendar and give it about 4 or 5 days from a full moon, because I've never fished well on that. So many options here, though. I really could go into a lot more detail about this, especially the whole lake thing, but that's a whole nother presentation and a huge rabbit hole. So let's move on. Oh, look, the Deschutes again. Now that salmon fly hatch is over, people have cleared off the water, but fishing still stays good. Caddis, and more caddis are around for hungry trout, and typically steelhead fishing is going to start in the lower river. If you can manage hotter days or go when it's a little cooler, you will be rewarded for sure. Steelheading, it's going to start on the Deschutes right around the 4th of July. And for the first couple months, it's best to stay closer to the mouth, basically Max Canyon and downstream. By September, fish are spread out through the system. When targeting steelhead, I might suggest these tips. Use your classic flies and skaters in the mornings and evenings when shadow is on the water. But if you want to up your odds in the middle of the day, use a sink tip, a little bit bigger fly, and you will catch more fish. Now, here is one note on this too. We had incredibly low Columbia River counts for steelhead, so we did not get a summer season on this river. Luckily, winter steelhead already this year, we've seen an increase in numbers drastically from last year, so I'm hoping we will have a summer steelhead fishery on the Deschutes. We will just have to keep an eye on things and our fingers crossed, but hope for that. Okay, trout fishing though on the Deschutes, typically you want to stay above Max Canyon. I love Warm Springs section. The water stays super cold all year long, and the trout have the potential to be much larger, just like all the other places I've talked about. If you can float the river or walk further, your odds are going to increase. Again, watch water temperatures, just like last year we had hoot owl. Okay. An off-the-grid fishery, the Donner and Blitzen. This one is seldom talked about, and for very good reason. It's about 5 hours from Portland, so not very close. And B, it's got some really darn big fish with very little pressure. Sitting alongside the Steens Mountain, you're pretty remote with only a few campgrounds and a general store. That's all that is out there, plus maybe a few wild horses. The best time for this guy is August through September. Though it can be good in the spring, the mosquitoes, I can tell you, are not. From personal experience, you have never seen mosquitoes as bad as this river. Not even as bad or even worse than Alaska. Late summer is definitely the time to be there. Do not go in the spring. This is a walk and wade fishery. Be prepared to do so. Luckily, there are trails and hungry fish. When I go, I like streamer fishing personally, but there can be lots of hoppers around, especially in that latter part of the summer. So dry fly fishing can be pretty good. This is about as close as Oregon gets to really a Montana feel without all the people, but all the fun. One last thing on the stream, because it's so remote, you need to bring everything that you would need. The general store has soda, but not much else. And it's a long drive back to the town of Burns. So be prepared. Okay, the Cowlitz River in Washington. This is another one that doesn't get much love that it deserves. This river is about an hour and a half from Portland. So a little bit of a drive for you guys, but you know, getting maybe a hair further than the Deschutes for you. This has a stellar summer steelhead return, and it has one of the few sea run hatchery or sea run cutthroat hatchery fisheries. So there is a ton of sea runs that come back to this stream. The steelhead are in this river throughout the summer, but the best months are September and October. And this is when those sea runs come back into that system. The sea runs and the steelhead will take skaters and classic flies, so you can fish them both with the same tackle, or just target sea runs and have a blast on your 5-weight when you accidentally hook a steelhead. It's amazing. The only downside to this fishery is bank access. Blue Creek Hatchery offers some of the most bank access, but it's really a boat show, and you got to float it. Luckily, there's really no technical water on it, no rapids of any sort, and so it's a very easy river to float. I highly recommend. It is a great way to get your swing game in check. With how many cutthroats are around, you can have double-digit fishery pretty easy when those things are in, and then with a 1 or 2 steelhead, if they're in thick, it's a great option. Okay, so now we will be moving on to fall. Is there any questions on summer?
Yeah, there was a couple questions regarding dory fishing. Do you have a particular shop in Pacific City that you recommend, or a guide that you like?
Yeah, so there's a shop in Pacific City, and that's Jack. And I haven't been with Jack, but I've heard wonderful things. The other one, and he'll do stuff with Jack as well, but his name is Rob Perkins, and his outfitter is Connect Outfitters, and he custom builds wooden dories. He built his dory. Amazing guy, amazing guide, super fun. Most of the pictures on that slideshow, either I took with him or he took himself. But that's who I use and highly recommend. But either him or Jack are the 2 fly guides for Pacific City, and are both outstanding.
And regarding the Donner Blitzen, is it all open water? Is it all public water? Is there certain areas that you like to target? And what about upstream from Page Springs Campground?
Yeah, so that river is very interesting, and the fish are very migratory. I was told by a biologist that in a given year, the fish will move 100 miles, which is just insane when you figure most, I think, trout on the Deschutes don't move at all. I like to fish the Page Springs area, and that's pretty much all public. There's a deadline of Bridge Creek where Bridge Creek enters, and you can't go below there. It's all protected. But everything from there upstream is amazing. Going into the canyon and then coming back around, there's another campground, which I just cannot remember the name of off the top of my head. Dave Hughes wrote a book on it, and it is spectacular up there. Smaller, different kind of experience. And that's what's great about the Donner Blitzen. You can be at Page Springs and have that nice wide open field, or you can hike up into the canyon, or you can hike up those little creeks, and you just get a different feel, 1 mile to another mile. It's amazing.
Regarding dory fishing in Pacific City, Bill Crucial said Jack Harrell at pacificcity.flyfishing.com is a place to go.
Yes, yeah, and that's Jack. Yep, he's good. He's great.
pacificcity.flyfishing.com. I think that's it.
Perfect. Okay, let's get into fall. So fall, this would be the other time that there's just too many options. If I could clone myself and then put all the memories back together, this would probably be another one of those months that I wish I had that technology. But so here are my top picks for this season. The Mackenzie and the Middle Fork Willamette, another fishery that has 2 species to target, summer steelhead and trout. These rivers fish basically year round, and I could pretty much throw them in almost every one of these seasons. But if I had to pick one of them, I would use fall, typically because, again, those 2 options of summer steelhead and trout. September into November, depending on weather, is going to be kind of my prime time and my pick. Trout fishing is really going to pick up once that water, kind of starts cooling down and we get out of those blazing hot months and hot days. These fish really start to, kind of key in on dries again. Those summer steelhead also get a little bit more active. Feel like they can get kind of hard to get when they're frying. And so I just kind of watch water temperature in the valley, and that's one good way to kind of like keep an eye on things. There are a few rivers locally in Oregon that we're allowed to fish out of a boat. And this is another reason why these rivers take such a high pick. And being able to fish without having to wade can be just so nice, especially with the Deschutes and how slimy it's gotten. It's not if you're going to fall, it's how many times you fall, right? So that's the great part about the Mackenzie and the Willamette is just ease of fishing. And so being able to throw dry droppers all day from the comfort of the drift boat is just a pretty sweet deal. And having the option of a steelhead, that's just the huge bonus. And that's why I love those rivers. Okay, moving along, we are back around to Sea Run Cutthroat on our coastal rivers. Now, September and October are the months the big sea runs start making an appearance again. Once those rivers cool down a bit or we get a little rain, the fish start coming back up big time. Now, we had probably one of the biggest returns of quality sea run, I would say, this last fall that I've ever seen. And it actually started early. We started getting them like maybe the last 2 weeks of August. So September is usually the time frame. Now, all the same options that we had in the spring, just like before, the Wilson, the Selects, the Trask, the Kilchis, the Elsey, the Nehalem, Nestucca, basically everything that dumps into the ocean or even a bay. These bigger trout now are very used to eating bait fish. So again, we're going to go to those same flies that we talked about a little bit earlier that act like they've got a little bit more movement. So I'm going to skate or swing those streamers so it's acting a little bit like their prey. Most of these fish are also going to follow up the salmon. And I really think they kind of key in on some of probably the coho eggs or some of, maybe there's still some summer salmon in there. But if your fly is colored pink or red, I don't know if it's because it looks like a salmon egg, but they just love to eat those things, especially those sea runs. So try to match the hatch per se of maybe a little bit of an egg-ish pattern. And I think that'll help you do the trick. Since these fish are migratory though, they do move up in pods. So what I've noticed, and this is the big helper for most people getting into this fishery, move around as much as possible. If you go to one spot and you fish there for 20 minutes and don't catch anything, there's probably not a pod there. Move. If the other statement is true, if you make a few casts and you catch a fish, do not move to the next spot until you've tried some more casts in there and catch the other fish that might be in that pod. But you might hit 3 to 5 spots before you start finding fish. So move as much as possible and you will find more fish. Most people ignore this fishery because there's so much going on. Again, we had those weird things with the Deschutes and all that other stuff. This is a great option we have locally without worrying about heat or declining fisheries. This fishery is amazing and is barely tapped in these latter part of the fall months. Okay. Speaking of salmon returning, coho or silver salmon start their migration back into the rivers in September and go all the way through November. We have a lot of options with these fish from our coastal rivers, the Sandy, the Clackamas, the Rogue, the Umpqua, basically everything that an anadromous fish can get up, these guys will go up. That's what makes them so cool. And we had the biggest return we've had in over 20 years, I believe. This last season, this fishery is just starting to get good. Okay, so these fish can be a little finicky to a fly, and every day is different. You can go one day and get skunked and go the next and get 10. Most of it will depend on river conditions and how fresh the fish are into the system. Typically, the fresher they are, the more aggressive the fish are going to be. And also, cloudy days are really going to help. Right after a storm, even better. We want something to get those fish aggressive to eat a fly. And sunny days when those fish are stale, not very aggressive. Coho, I love this saying, coho are like cats, and they basically need to be encouraged to bite. I recommend stripping flies with a fast sinking line to get their attention. Usually I use like a single hand rod, but you can definitely still use a spade to do this. Try using brightly colored flies that are big and heavy. Typically pink, purple chartreuse will do the trick. Just like steelhead though, the more you go, the better your odds. Don't expect to go out there your first time coho fishing and go hook a ton. It's going to take a little bit of time. But unlike steelhead fishing, it's not like you're probably going to go out there and catch one when it's on. You're probably going to go catch hopefully a couple. The Metolius in fall, another repeat, but totally worth the time. Once we get after Labor Day, most people start leaving this place alone, but that's when it really starts getting good again. Less people always equals better fishing. Take that note down, Todd. Bull trout also start making more of an appearance, and so do the kokanee. The kokanee will offer tasty eggs to the trout as they spawn and flesh to the bull trout as they die. But the real reoccurrence is the green drakes. The lesser green drake, or I like to call it a flav, there's some other names for it out there too, are a little bit smaller, lesser version of the spring green drake. But the trout love them nonetheless. These bugs hatch from September through October, typically cloudy or rainy days. So just like what we were talking about in June, will really help these bugs come out. Don't forget about this gem. When you fish it in the right conditions, it almost becomes easy, I promise. And I've told this 1,000 times about this river, but there are no bad days on the Metolius, only fish whistles. Okay, and back to the shoots. Oh, yep, it just keeps on fishing. And now steelheading is in full swing in fall, and yes, pun intended. Fish are throughout the whole lower Deschutes up to the dam. Trout fishing is still going strong, and now that the lower section, that like Max Canyon section, has cooled down in water temperature, now trout fishing down there is even productive again. The prime months for steelhead on the Deschutes, if I could pick any months, would be September through November. Those fish just keep on coming late into the season, though when it gets into October and November, it can get pretty cold out there, almost winter steelhead weather. So you really need to make sure you pack a coat and layers. When that water gets into that sub 50s, the fish get lethargic. So use your winter steelhead tactics like sink tips and larger flies, and that's going to help keep up productivity in that later part of the season. Trout fishing stays strong with October caddis and blueing olives, but whitefish also gear up to spawn, and trout really love eating those eggs. So if you can, put on a nymph with a pink hotspot and watch the show. Trout fishing just gets nuts. The Deschutes crowds are pretty much all but gone at this time. Rafters and campers have left for warmer temperatures, but the real secret is the weather still sometimes stays pretty nice in the early fall season. Like we had a week, I want to say it was in November or the first part of December, where it was 65 in Maupin. That's crazy. That's wonderful. It was colder in Portland and Salem than it was in Maupin. So that latter part of the fall can still be nice out there, though it can also be very frigid. Okay, Oregon's best kept secret, the John Day River. I'm sure I'm going to get death threats later from talking about this river. So I'll give you a different mailing address to send those to. The John Day has the largest return of wild steelhead in the state of Oregon for summer fish. This river is definitely a little off the grid and requires a little more effort to get out to, but it's worth every bit of it. Luckily, now there are lots of public access points on this river that have been added over recent years. Though most of it is a walk and wade fishery, there are still some floats available. The best time to fish the John Day is in October through November. Once river flows have increased and they've stopped irrigating, and then in that latter part of the season, just like the Deschutes, it can get really cold. So watch the weather. It can get even so cold as the river will actually freeze over. Like I've been out there in November and actually seen icebergs basically going down river. It is very hard to swing a fly when your fly line is stuck to a chunk of ice. If you can make the drive, it is worth it. This place holds a special place in my heart. There is nothing else like it. Now, here's a sad note. This year, again, because of the low Columbia fish counts, they did close the season on the John Day. Hopefully, it will open up next season because we have our fingers crossed and we're going to have the best summer steelhead run ever. Knock on wood. So, that is that on fall. And any questions on that before we get into winter?
There was a late question regarding summer, and that was, have you had any experience on the Malheur River?
On the which one?
Malheur?
I have not fished that one at all. I've got a couple people that do, but I wouldn't say I know enough to like give tips on it, right? That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know anything about it either. Regarding steelhead fishing on the Deschutes in the fall, what areas do you usually target for that?
So I would say majority of my time frame, I am fishing from Maupin down to the mouth. And really it kind of depends that early season going into basically almost about to October, I'm Max Canyon area and maybe down. I really enjoy floating it and doing camp trips. So that's like the stretch down to the mouth takes about 2 to 3 days, and it's just nice to unplug. But that section from Beaver Tail or Pine Tree down to Max, that's great. The lower you are, the kind of better in that early time frame. Once we get into basically, September, and then October, November, our days start getting shorter though, especially that November timeframe. And so I don't have time to go over there and float a whole trip. So if I'm just going to road fish it, I just stay right in either Maupin or drive down to Max. And that way I can just hit a few runs and maybe, then head home or take it easy.
That was it.
Okay, that was it?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, let's get into winter. Okay. Oh, I love and hate this season altogether. funny that by fall, I pretty much can't wait for it. But then by February, all I want is it to be over with. You know, go figure. And here is why I both love and hate it in 2 words: winter steelhead. There is no fish that I would rather catch more than a winter steelhead, but God, they make you just absolutely crazy. So let's split this up a bit and make it into 2 sections. Coastal rivers and the Columbia tributaries. To make that a little easier, we'll just say the Clackamas and the Sandy. Coastal rivers start fishing good around Christmas. Some earlier, like this year, we had early rain and we actually had fish being caught in the latter part of November out on the coast. It was amazing. Not all years, but this year it did. Weather depending, and it's going to go through about March or so for most of the coastal stuff. Just like all steelheading, it's a numbers game. The more you go, the better your odds get. And if I have a theme to this, that's basically it. The coastal rivers fluctuate quite a bit since they're mainly rain runoff. So have a good idea of which rivers fish at what height. Give yourself the best odds possible by fishing the right river at the right water height. So check river gauges. There's lots of good resources out there. USGS, NOAA, all have kind of sites or predictions that can give you ideas of what the rivers are going to do. Now, be very careful with those prediction sites. I believe it's like 50% accurate one day out and then like 10% accurate past that. So there's many times that I've looked at a graph and gone, oh, no, not going to go. And then I wake up that morning and went, oh, I should have gone. So just take those with a grain of salt. Now, because the coast rivers are more channels than they are really runs for the most part, I prefer to use heavier flies to get down. You want to get down quickly in a channel. And faster sink tips can definitely help too, but I'm not worried as much as the inside as I am as much with the next rivers we're going to go through. So the Columbia tributaries can get some fishes a little earlier than the coastal rivers sometimes. This year, it was about the same. We got them in about November. But like previous years, last year, the Sandy had fish in it pretty good in the end of November, and the coast had none. So, you know, go figure. These rivers get much more snowpack than those coastal brethren, which can be good and bad. They can take a little bit longer to clear, but they can hold into shape for longer if it's colder up on the mountain. So prime example in this last storm, the Clackamas is a lower drainage system, right? Or lower elevation. So we got all that snow and then we had a hot storm come through, melted all that snow, blew everything out, except for the Sandy. The Sandy had that, but it only blew out for like a day, maybe if that. So got cold on the mountain right afterwards. All that snow basically froze again, and the river dropped and cleared and was in perfect shape. So coastal rivers, higher tendency of blowing out. Willamette drainages, as long as your higher snow elevation, might hold into shape longer. Now, I still like using probably heavy sink tips for most of these rivers all winter long. But a lot of times I like to use a lighter fly, like a tube fly or something with like light cone, light BB chain, whatever. And that's so I can fish that inside seam. Since these rivers are typically more broad, swinging that fly all the way to the inside is where you're going to get some of those fish to follow in, and they'll still feel safe. Where again, the coastal rivers, they want to be in that deeper gut. So just like the coastal rivers, you need to go as much as you can. Bad weather, good weather, all of it. Every time you get out there, it's just increasing your odds. Steelhead fishing is like gambling. And then the closest thing it is to is like pulling the handle on a slot machine. The more times you put a penny in that slot and pull that handle, the higher odds you have of getting a lucky strike. It's one other thing on this is it's good to fish all these rivers, but you'll never be a master at all of them. I suggest trying to pick a few of them to be really good at, like pick one over that's a Willamette or sandy drainage, and then try to pick one or two that's maybe a coastal drainage. And that way you have options. But if you're one day on the sandy, the next day on the coast, the next day on the Clackamas, next day back onto a different river on the coast, you're never really understanding those rivers completely. And so the more time that you deal on one river and get to really know how it likes to fish, the easier it will be to pick those right conditions. And, you know, what river is the right river to pick? That's hard to say, but pick wisely. So here is a hidden winter gem, now that we've gotten away from steelhead. Washington stocks a few lakes in the gorge with trophy-sized trout during the winter months. I'm not overly excited with this fishery, but it is a great one when everything else is blown out or you're just absolutely over steelheading. I won't give away the names of these lakes. I've got to make you work for something, but a little digging in the Washington regulations or stocking charts, and Oregon possibly does this a little bit too, you can find it pretty darn easily. Now, stripping small leech patterns under an intermediate sinking line will basically do the trick. These fish are not smart. Check the weather. This is winter after all, and nobody likes 40-mile-an-hour winds or ice. And yes, I have gone to one of those lakes and it's literally frozen solid and I could have gone ice skating. That was a bad call. I hit this fishery about once a year just to kind of get the stink of steelheading off, or to take a friend and catch a big fish that has never had the chance. It's not the most glorious fisheries, but it really does make for an epic photo. So it's a fun one to kind of check the box on. Oh, wow. What do you know? The Deschutes, again, yep, it just absolutely fishes all year. Also worth mentioning, the Crooked. This river, again, it fishes pretty much way more than just the winter, but this is about the time of year I personally fish it. It's just can be such a far drive that I probably don't fish as much as I should, but it is a wonderful trout fishery. Both the Deschutes and the Crooked typically don't blow out when winter storms hit, leaving both of them great option for winter fisheries. Currently, I've talked to lots of people when you can drive there. That last winter storm definitely was getting hard to get over the passes, but right prior and probably right now, the Deschutes and Crooked are fishing awesome. So if you've ever, or if you've never fished the east side during snow, it is a real treat. And to get to know those rivers in a whole new light, it is so cool. Definitely try it. The dry fly fishing, probably not going to be the best. There will be a little blueing olive hatch some days, typically midday. I would say usually noon till about 2 if you're trying to hit something. Otherwise, you need to just be prepared to nymph. But the nymphing can be lights out, especially if you're into that Euro stuff, which can be fun. Don't just only check weather conditions of out there. We get in this habit of just looking at weather at Maupin. You need to check the road conditions of where you're going to be driving through. Don't forget to check like Sandy Am Pass or 26 Government Camp. I typically, during the winter, because I'm over in Washington, don't like to take any of the passes. I try to get over 84 because I don't have to deal with snow traffic or ski traffic or anything, mountain storms, anything like that. But definitely check your route if you want to go to the east side in winter. Nothing worse than getting to Detroit and finding out that the road is closed. So there's wonderful websites. I think it's ODOT, and you can even just go and check their CAM page and look at the river to see, or sorry, road to see how much snow is on it. Remember, steelheading isn't the only thing available to you in the winter. Trout still have to eat bugs. Okay, so putting it all together and finding your path to the infinite season. I know we just went through a ton of stuff and probably a little overwhelming. It took time for me to get into the rhythm of my seasons, and still they are really ever changing depending on regulations, like this year, the hoot owls and the closures, or the opportunities that might get offered to you. Someone asks you to go to a place you haven't been. Find the ones you enjoy most, but try to add something new every now and then. And you really might find that new place you enjoy more than maybe your old ones. So I'm just going to go through my thing real quick here as kind of what my season looks like. And then we'll just take questions at the end and we'll be all set. And then you guys can ask any of the winter questions again. Currently, this is what my calendar looks like. I'll break it down into months so it's a little easier to see. Starting with spring, April, I'm pretty much bouncing between the Deschutes and the Metolius, trout fishing. Can't wait for that. I'm already jonesing for it. May, I may pretty much just live on the Deschutes, hitting the salmon fly hatch for all it's worth. I just can't get enough. If my wife is probably going to divorce me, that'll be the month because I will not be around. June, shad, maybe a little lakes or local trout streams thrown in, but I do have a shad problem. Luckily, they're not super far, so I can usually escape sometimes just for a half a day out there. July, the hex hatch and lakes pretty much take my priority, but I'll try to get out and maybe do some dory fishing or chase some carp, depending on what the weather is doing and how hot it is. August, still chasing trout in lakes for me, but maybe escape the heat and go to the coast for a dory fishing trip. Bass and carp still an option, again, weather depending. September, oh, this is where it gets good again. Too many options. I can't decide, but steelheading is probably on the top of my list at that point. I filled myself up with trout and lake fishing and bass. So Deschutes is like hard and heavy, but chasing trout in a number of rivers is still a great option. I mean, you got Donner and Blitzen and, you know, the Cowlitz and all that stuff. October, summer steelhead, completely obsessed. Can't get enough of it. Sometimes I might be able to get talked into trout fishing on the Metolius, but summer steelhead's ruling the roost in October for me. November, oh, steelheading still. It's like the burnout is real, but it's just so good still on that east side that I can usually not be pulled away. My family does not know me in the month of November. Okay, December. If I slow down a little bit, it's probably this month. I try to prepare for the holidays. I mean, all of us typically sometimes have guests or extended family that come over. So at that point, if I do get to escape, it's at something local. Winter steelheading, maybe are poking in, so I might try there. But trout fishing usually isn't bad. And then there's still a little bit of maybe some coho around too. So that's another option. January, fully engaged at winter steelhead at the moment. Trout are on the back burner, and that's what, I mean, my brain is currently. February, I will still be engaged in winter steelheading, and it is finally really starting to get good. We're starting to get those big wild fish in. This is where I'm really excited. Trout fishing definitely on the back burner in February for me. March, winter steelhead in its absolute prime. If there is any month that I could tell you do not miss out on winter steelheading, it is March. Is my burnout real on steelhead at that point? Oh yes. God, I just about hate the fishery. I can basically be, even though it's the best, I can probably be talked out of it if someone really wants to go trout fishing, and I'm easily swayed. But that pretty much wraps up my season, and at that point, it pretty much starts all over. I get back into April trout fishing on the Deschutes or the Metolius. And maybe I try something new or throw something exotic in there, but that's really it. Now, I hope you guys have found some new places to try and got some helpful tips or anything along that way. Again, I know that was a lot to take in, and so you are welcome to come by the shop, give us a call, and I will share any knowledge I have on whatever you want to know. And if anyone wants any info on guides or any rivers I mentioned, I'll be happy to help. Also, casting classes, Bureau clinics, we totally got you covered at the top. Just let me know if there's any questions. And I really do want to thank the club for having me. You guys are awesome to deal with my technical difficulties with trying to run.
Well, it was perfect this time, Nick, and thanks for all the great information, the nice organization, the way you presented the various fishing opportunities. I've invited everybody to unmute themselves. And when you do unmute yourself and ask a question, please state your name and then your question. Nick, for me, probably the most compelling thing, the thing I've had on the back burner for a long time was dory fishing. Going out through the surf in the dory. I mean, what fun would that be? We did have a presentation on that a few years back, and that's probably something I will try sometime this spring, summer. How about the rest of you? Any questions for Nick? Go ahead, say your name and then ask your question, please.
Nick,
Don't be bashful.
Nick, you talked about, and this is Todd York. You talked about carp in rivers. I've seen them in lakes. I've seen them at Fern Ridge Reservoir.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever done that? And how does that change the game?
It's pretty similar. Like around here, I mean, I've even fished some of the like local ponds that are behind like a Safeway, you know, or golf courses if you have access, right? The hard part, I can tell you, this is the weird thing about carp fishing, is that a lot of times they can hear your footsteps. And so walking on the ground spooks them. And so a lot of times, like I wear like rubber soles, no studs. Walking in ponds is like the biggest disaster out there, right? And you immediately usually go up to your waist in muck and goose poop. So you got to be a little bit stealthier, right? And watch out for reeds and that kind of stuff. But really the same flies, same stuff. It all depends on what the carp are eating too. In the Columbia, carp eat more clams and a lot of bugs that are just right there. So their food source is so abundant, they don't like to move for things. In some ponds and lakes, carp don't have as much food. And so you can actually strip woolly buggers because they'll be eating bait fish. And so sometimes it can be easier. It just depends on the carp.
Thank you.
Tim, did you have a question? Tim Keller? I see you've unmuted.
Yeah, I was going to just mention that the mosquitoes on the Blitzen can get really bad.
I've been there.
And on a windy day, you're really glad when the wind's blowing 30 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But that fishing has been crazy good for me.
I'm craving something we're missing.
Thanks for mentioning that.
The story of when the guide says, but the rattlesnakes are terrible, then you want to be there then. I think
Yeah.
mosquitoes are the same way. Fishing the river in spring can be pretty incredible. Don't let the mosquitoes bother you.
Yeah.
I asked the people who used to run the field station there, Malheur once, how they dealt with the mosquitoes. And they said, you just become one with them. I'm going to have to mute that person. I'm sorry, Bill, I got to mute you. There's too much background noise. If you want to ask a question, Bill, go ahead and unmute, but there's just too much background noise. Anybody else? Don't be shy. Here's your chance.
I would like to ask a question, or no, it's a statement. It's a statement, really. Nick, this presentation is so unreal, and it just brings so many memories back fishing with you. I was Nick's guinea pig for a lot of this. We floated the Columbia for shad in his cataract. That was wild. Don't recommend that, but it was really fun. you know, the carp fishing is frustrating, the most frustrating fishery that there is. But it's really fun, and you are hunting those fish. They're not dumb. They're super finicky. But when you get one, I haven't gotten one. My buddy Kirsten did with Nick and I. You know, and I feel like I finally have a fishing calendar thanks to Nick. He's helped me figure out my fishing calendar. And I am deep in steelheading right now, so wish me luck to save my mental health. But an awesome presentation, Nick. Super stoked.
Thank you, Shandy. I'm glad that you were able to survive most of those things, because there was definitely some touch and go in a few of those trips. I don't think I will ever try crossing the Columbia again in a 14-foot cataract. That was the dumbest idea I think I've done in a long time. But we survived.
Oh, we did it. Yeah.
Gerald, I see you've unmuted yourself. Did you have a question, Gerald? Well, I think that's it, Nick. Thanks for an outstanding program.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for being able to redo it, unfortunately, with that first time. But I really appreciate you guys. You guys are an awesome club. Keep up the good work. Keep fishing.
Well, it was well worth the wait.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Bye, Todd.
And we want Nick to come to the Shadorama, right? In June, everyone?
Absolutely.
I will try to be there.
Yeah. You will be there. You will.
I'll be there 100%.
We need the Shad King.
All right. Well, good night, everybody.
Tim,
Hi, everyone.
Oh, yeah.
this is Robin.
Yes, Robin.
I don't know if anybody has heard, the fly shop in Welch's is closing. They've got 30% off. They've got to be out by the end of the month.
Oh,
Ooh,
Wow.
that sucks.
Yeah, that's shocking news.
Just too many things hit them this year, and the building sold and the new owner wants them out.
okay.
Oh, Mark's gonna be grumpy.
Well, that's sad. Any other announcements?
Yeah, Tim's the best. Thank you.
Yeah, Tim, thank you so much for your work with Zoom and everything else. Awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good night, everybody.
Don't be
Good
shy.
night.